So have you ever wondered why? What is it about Portland that makes the homeless crisis so significant when compared to other cities throughout the country? You know, what is that? Why are we in this mess that we're in? And what I'd like to do is I'd like to answer that question, but before I do, I want to talk about 3 misconceptions about homelessness, okay? And the first one is that homelessness is increasing throughout the United States, and that's simply not true. In fact, homelessness decreased 10% nationwide from 2009 to 2019. And geographically, it declined in 39 states. Number 2 is that homelessness is concentrated in states because of weather. Well, that's not necessarily true. Granted, it's easier to be homeless in Portland than it is in Chicago, especially in the wintertime, no doubt about that. If it were, why is homelessness relatively low in the warm weather states of Florida, Arizona, Texas, and pretty much throughout the South? Third misconception is that it's primarily caused by a lack of affordable housing. There are many factors that contribute to the homeless crisis, but a lack of affordable housing is not a primary cause. Despite suffering from high rates of addiction and mental illness, the homeless make rational decisions, just like you and me, okay? And they are highly responsive to public policy. They migrate towards those cities with the most permissive policy environments and towards cities with the most generous benefits. In addition, I'm going to talk about today what I believe that our elected officials are applying the wrong solution to the problem. So, in summary, 3 reasons why homelessness in Portland is out of control is 1, we have permissive policies that encourage homelessness to thrive. 2, our compassion, our generous benefits enable the homeless crisis to continue. And we're applying the wrong, in my opinion, we're applying the wrong solution to the problem. Yesterday, I saw this article in the Oregonian. I just had to stick it in. It just was so pertinent. And this is the title of it. It's Oregon's Recent Growth in Homelessness Among Largest in Nation. It was written by Nicole Hayden and Jamie Goldberg of the Oregonian. And they indicated that Oregon's homeless population over the last 2 years has grown by 23%, means about 18,000 people now are homeless in Portland. 23% increase in the last 2 years. So how does this compare with other parts of the country? The national average during the same period of time is it went up less than 1%. Washington, state of Washington, it went up 10%, and the poster child for homelessness, being the state of California, it only went up 6%. So we went up 4 times faster than the state of California. That's shocking. Let me talk about reason number 1, why permissive policies inadvertently encourage homelessness to thrive, okay? We're no longer enforcing existing vagrancy laws. And the reason why we're supposedly not enforcing the existing vagrancy laws is the Martin versus Boise court ruling. And this court ruling prohibits cities from enforcing anti-camping ordinances if they do not have enough homeless shelter beds available for their homeless population. You don't have enough shelter beds, you can't enforce your vagrancy laws, okay? However, Bob Day, who was the former deputy chief of police for the Portland City Police Department, says that prior to COVID, the police were enforcing existing vagrancy laws without violating this court ruling. So not enforcing the existing vagrancy laws is a policy decision. It is not as a result of trying to comply with this court ruling. Number 2, lack of prosecuting property crimes. As everyone in this room knows, our law enforcement system is badly broken in the Portland area. In 2020, Portland was racked with 100 consecutive days of street protests in response to the murder of George Floyd. And as a result, police officers retired in droves. I mean, can you blame them? I certainly can't. Portland Police Department is now critically below the necessary staffing level to maintain law and order. And this has resulted in focusing on prosecuting only the most egregious types of crimes like homicide and aggravated assault. Prosecuting property crimes is a much lower priority. The lack of prosecution encourages the fencing of stolen goods, which supports an addict's habit. They know there's a little chance of jail time in the unlikely case they get caught. But there are consequences to doing this. And as a result of our policy not to prosecute property crimes, Walmart just announced that they're closing their last 2 stores in Portland. Number 3, ballot measure 110, decriminalize possession of hard drugs like meth and heroin and cocaine. In September of last year, after about 18 months of this particular measure being enforced, the Oregon Health Authority admitted that the new law had failed, which has actually encouraged more drug usage by addicts living on the street. And I believe Measure 110 should be repealed. Number 4, opposing the use of coercion to encourage addicted to seek treatment. There used to be a drug court in Portland, and there still is in Washington County. Offenders would go before a judge, and the judge would give them one of 2 options. You have a choice. You can either seek treatment, or you can go to jail. You choose. And the use of coercion, in this case jail time, helped the addicted to make the right decision. We no longer have a drug court. This needs to change. And finally, opposing the involuntary treatment of the mentally ill. It is virtually impossible to treat the mentally ill without their consent, even though it's in their best interest to do so. Their individual rights supersede the rights of everyone else, and this needs to change. So these are the 5 policies, there are probably more, but these are the 5 policies that inadvertently encourage the homeless crisis to flourish in Portland. Reason number 2 for our out-of-control homeless crisis is our compassion is enabling the homeless crisis to continue. So what do I mean by enabling? So the definition of enabling is this: helping in such a way that rather than solving the problem, it perpetuates the problem. So that's the definition of enabling. Joint Office of Homeless Services over the past 2 years has given out 22,000 tents and 69,000 tarps. Now, does that solve the homeless crisis? No, that perpetuates the homeless crisis. Multnomah County this year has a budget of $255 million, or approximately $49,000 per homeless person. And if you were to add the budgets for Washington County and Clackamas County, the city of Portland, and all the other cities in the Portland metro area, that probably would be approaching $100,000 per homeless person. And we also support homeless by funding bond measures. We had a huge bond measure in 2020 for helping the homeless. And we also financially support 325 nonprofits that help the homeless in the Portland metro area. I mean, that's a lot of nonprofits helping the homeless, right? Well, this interview went viral in January, and millions of people saw it. And the title of it was, "Portland Woman Claims It's a Piece of Cake to Be Homeless in the City." Wendy went on to say, that's probably why you've got so many out here, because they feed you 3 meals a day, and you don't have to do blank, but stay in your tent, or if you smoke a lot of dope, you can do that. Our benefits in the Portland area are very generous. But I disagree with Wendy. Life on the street is not a piece of cake. Life on the street is a living hell, as evidenced by these statistics. 75% of the homeless are addicted to drugs or alcohol. 78% have a mental illness. 72% of homeless women and 30% of homeless youth have been raped. And the homeless die 22 years earlier than a general population. And no one should be subjected to these types of conditions. No one. The question that begs to be asked is this: when does our compassion cross over the line and become enabling? So in 1964, Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart defined pornography as, "I know it when I see it." Okay? That was a famous line of his. And I think the same is true for enabling. We know it when we see it. And here's a perfect example, a very egregious example of enabling. There is a current bill before the Oregon State Legislature, they're proposing to give $1,000 a month for 12 months to the homeless. Now, when you have 75% of the people on the street drug addicted, what do you think they're going to use that money for? They're going to go on a 12-month bender, is what's going to happen, and many of them are going to die. Another unintended consequence of our permissive public policies and generous benefits is this. Multnomah County's 2019 point-in-time homeless census, it revealed that 53% of our homeless population were homeless upon arrival. In other words, they got off the bus and they were already homeless. And of these, 2/3 were from outside of the state of Oregon. 1/3 were from within the state of Oregon, but from other cities throughout the state of Oregon that moved to Portland. And based on several conversations I've had over the years with executive directors of nonprofits that help the homeless, they tell me that many of these people are bused here. Let's say you have somebody in Texas who runs afoul of the law, and the police officer says you have a choice. You can either go to jail or we'll give you a one-way bus ticket to Portland. Yeah, so that's what's happening. So most officials believe that the primary cause of homelessness is this, a lack of affordable housing. And they do have good evidence to suggest that. The evidence is that home prices and rental rates have soared in recent years. And we do have, I would be the first one to admit, we do have a housing affordability problem in Portland. But I don't believe the housing crisis is fueling the homeless crisis. I think they're two separate crises with two different sets of underlying causes. So if affordable housing is not the cause of the homeless crisis, what is? Okay? Well, before I can answer that question, and I will, I need to introduce you to the idea that there is a precursor to homelessness. And I think this is a really important concept to understand, maybe one of the most important that I'm talking about today. So what is a precursor? A precursor is something that comes before something else and often influences its development, okay? Well, Brandy Tuck, who's the executive director of Path Home, she nailed it when she said this. You don't become homeless when you run out of money, which is what we think of typically. You become homeless when you run out of relationships. People living on the street no longer have family or friends to fall back on when times get difficult. I mean, if they did, they wouldn't be homeless, right? They would be, at the very least, they'd be couch surfing, and maybe their friends or family actually would help pay for their rent. So the lack of relationships, not money, should be considered a precursor to homelessness. It doesn't cause homelessness, right? But a lack of relationships must exist for homelessness to happen. So what are the real causes of homelessness? Well, one of the things that we do at Hope for the Homeless Foundation is when we interview nonprofits to determine whether or not we want to provide financial support to them, we ask them a bunch of different questions. And one of those questions is, what are the underlying causes of homelessness that you see in the target population that you try to help? And these are the people that are on the front lines. These are people that are dealing with it on a daily basis. This isn't somebody in an ivory tower trying to tell you, academically what's causing the problem. These are the people that really know. And this is what they say. And I put the first two up right at the same time because I can tell you which one is considered more important, mental illness or addiction. And it's on everybody's list. You talk to anybody that helps the homeless, nonprofits, those two are gonna be there. Third one is trauma. Now, trauma comes from a variety of different sources, but the two most common ones are women and children fleeing domestic violence, that type of trauma, or it could be veterans suffering from PTSD. The fourth one is physical disabilities, and the fifth one is a lack of living wage job skills. Notice that a lack of affordable housing was not on that top 5 list. Now, I do want to say this. I do believe it's on the list somewhere. I know of homeless people that I've known that have actually lost their housing due to rent increases, okay? So it does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's down the list quite a ways. Maybe it's in the top 10, I don't know. But it's not one of the top reasons for homelessness. Our elected officials, though, are really supporters of what's called Housing First. And Housing First was first started in the Bush administration in 2005, and Housing First advocates believe that homelessness is caused by a lack of affordable housing. And because of that, public camping should be allowed, and that the government should provide the homeless free or subsidized housing as a result, with no expectations of sobriety, work, or rehab programs. And they believe that treatment for addiction and mental illness should be strictly voluntary, and they're opposed to shelters. They consider shelters inhumane. And as a result, our shelter bed capacity has declined 34% in Portland from 2011 to 2022, at a time when we need more shelter beds. The third reason I gave initially why our homeless crisis is out of control is because we're finding the wrong solution to the homeless crisis. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Mayor Wheeler's plan, which he proposed last November. And in his plan, he wants to build 20,000 units over a 10-year period at $8.9 billion, which represents a cost of $490,000 per housing unit. Yeah. You know, the average price of a home in Portland is $450,000. So I am absolutely baffled. It just makes no sense to me. Governor Kotek, when she became governor in January, she declared a homeless state of emergency, and I agree with her. Her proposal was, or is, to build 36,000 new housing units statewide annually. And to be fair to both plans, their plans were much more robust than what I'm telling you here. I mean, they had a lot of different things going on in each of those plans, no doubt about it. But the centerpiece of both plans, the crown jewel of both plans, was to build more housing units. And in my opinion, you can't solve a problem with the wrong solution, okay? Understand this. We do need more subsidized housing in Portland. I absolutely agree, we do. We need it for the working poor. We need it for the disabled and the elderly. But the current approach is badly flawed. Cost of building is out of control, and the homeless should not be provided housing until their underlying causes of homelessness are addressed. And you say, well, why would that be? Well, when a homeless person is provided housing, he becomes isolated from his street family. And at that point, his street family is the only people that care for him. Understand, you know, they're talking about a precursor to homelessness is a lack of relationships. Well, they have now developed or formed strong bonds with people on the street. And so if you take them away from their only family they have, which is their street family, bad things are going to happen to them. They're going to be isolated, and as a result of that, you're going to see an increase in overdose and an increase in suicides. So you don't want to give the homeless housing until their causes of homelessness are addressed. If housing is not the solution, what is? I believe there are three criteria that must be included in any plan that attempts to solve the homeless crisis, okay? And the first one is it must address the issue of the non-compliant. So what do I mean by the non-compliant? I mean, you go up to some homeless person who's either mentally ill or addicted, and you say, we're going to provide you free services for your situation there. And they say, thank you, but I'm not interested. That is the non-compliant, in my opinion. And the vast majority of the people on the street fall into that category of the non-compliant. Now, what evidence do I have to suggest that's true? Well, in the first year, Measure 110, 16,000 Oregonians accessed free services from that measure, 16,000, okay? Of these, 132, which represents less than 1%, entered addiction treatment services. So about 132 out of the 16,000. And 99% access free needle exchanges and other harm reduction services so as to continue in their addiction. And there's also anecdotal evidence on the side for the mentally ill that shows the same lack of interest in seeking treatment. Now, just to let you know, I can be an equal opportunity offender. The 3 gubernatorial candidates that we had last year all had their own plans for helping the homeless. Some were better than others, but none of them were sufficient. And the reason why is that none of them addressed the 800-pound gorilla in the room. All of them wanted to provide them more services and things of that sort. And until you address the non-compliant, we're not going to solve this problem. The first one was address the issues of the non-compliant. The second one is to balance the rights of the unhoused with the rights of everyone else. Right now, the rights of the unhoused supersede the rights of everyone else. They can do what they want, where they want, when they want, and with really no adverse consequences for their actions. Number 3, we need to measure compassion not by good intentions, but by outcomes. There's almost a complete lack of data on the homeless crisis in Portland. Almost none, okay? And understand this, you can't improve what you don't measure. We are lacking the most basic of information to measure outcomes, okay? But with these 3 criteria in mind, HHF has developed a 9-step plan for solving the homeless crisis. On your desk are packets, and if you pass them down and open them up, there are 4 different documents in there, but the one I want to show you right now is this one. It's called Comprehensive Plan to Solve the Homeless Crisis. And I use the word solve. I'm actually willing to use that word. Not significantly reduce, I mean solve the homeless crisis. Okay? This is for you to take and to read and to give me your comments. And please do give me your comments, because this particular plan, I've made 30 revisions over the last year as a result of comments I received from people who've read it. And they'll say, what about this or what about that? And I say, yeah, that's a good point. And so I would encourage you to read that. I just want to go briefly through the 9-step plan. We'd be here all day if I went through each one in detail. And I know I don't have that luxury. And then I want to focus on just one of those. So, first one is gather relevant data to understand the homeless crisis. Again, we don't have any data, so we need to start gathering it. Provide shelter facilities and/or camping sites. 3, fund the most effective nonprofits helping the homeless. 4, enforce vagrancy laws. 5, repeal Measure 110. 6, establish a crisis stabilization center. 7, establish a substance abuse court. And then number 8, change criteria for involuntarily treating the mentally ill. And then number 9, establish a long-term care facility. Okay? At this time, though, I'd like to focus on just one of these 9 steps. And why not financially support the most successful organizations that help the homeless? You know, why not funnel our money to those organizations that are actually helping the homeless return to stability so they're no longer homeless? You know, it seems like the kid said there, it seems like a no-brainer to me. So how do you go about determining which nonprofit organizations to financially support? Well, that's where HHF comes into play. As we mentioned earlier, there are 325 nonprofits that help the homeless in the Portland metro area, okay? So which of the 325 organizations are worthy of financially supporting? Well, how they answer two fundamental questions really narrows down which organizations are making a lasting impact on the homeless crisis in Portland. And the first question is, do they address underlying causes of homelessness, yes or no? And if they do, then they have the potential of being able to actually affect change. And if the answer is no, they don't, I'm not trying to bash those organizations. Those organizations, more or less, are involved with compassionate care. And we need to be compassionate towards the homeless. That's the reason why my wife and I have, why we do what we do on Tuesday nights with the Jesus Table. That's compassionate care. I am not bashing compassionate care. We need to be compassionate towards the homeless. But that's not going to solve the problem. Number two is, do they assist with both transitional housing, in other words, get them off the street, then work on their underlying causes of homelessness, and then provide permanent housing when they're stabilized, okay? So by answering those two questions, we have about 50 organizations that can say yes to that. And those are the organizations that HHF will be vetting over the next several years. And what we do is organizations that meet these two criteria are thoroughly vetted by reviewing their financial records, their current budget, and doing an on-site visit of their facilities. And I would tell you, anytime that you would like to go on an on-site visit with us to vet one of these organizations, I would encourage you to come. We do it all the time. You really get a flavor for what they do and how they do it, and you see the passion that they have. We have some awesome organizations in the Portland area, and just going to see what they do, it's inspirational. It really is. You'll be inspired by what you see. So what we do next is we create an objective vetting summary that answers 5 critically important questions. And those questions are, do you know the number of people you attempted to house last year? Okay? It means going through that process of getting them off the street, stabilizing them, and then once stabilized, finding them permanent housing. And of those, do you know how many you actually succeeded in helping? So do you know your success rate? And do you know your success rate after 1 year? It's one thing to be successful immediately, it's another thing to be successful a year later. And if you're successful a year later, there's a higher probability that you'll be successful 2 and 5 and 10 years later. And then the fourth question is their effort cost effective? By that I mean, is the cost per person helped, reasonable? And then finally, do they focus on the chronically or the recently homeless? Our preference is for the chronically homeless. Those are the ones you see on the street, more or less, are the chronically homeless. So with those 5 questions, we put together a vetting summary. And here's an example of one vetting summary. This is Do Good Multnomah. Do Good Multnomah is an outstanding, an awesome organization. And we vetted them in 2020. So these are their vetting, their metrics for that year. They had a budget of $2.9 million. They target veterans, and they target the chronically homeless. And in that year, they attempted to help 208 people. And they were succeeded in helping 98, so they had a success rate of 47%. And 1 year later, those 47%, 92% were still housed at a cost of just less than $30,000, okay? So this is what we do with all the organizations we vet. So what I want you to do now is to pull out this page that's in that packet. These are the 12 organizations that we have vetted over the past 3 years. And instead of the numbers going down the page, they go across the page, but they're the exact same numbers as you're seeing there. And I want you to focus in on the 2 red boxes in the lower right-hand corner. The first red box has a number of 1,834. That happens to be the number of people that they successfully housed in the year that they were vetted, just a little over 1,800 people. And they did it at a cost, the other red box, of $7,149 per person. Okay? So the 12 organizations averaged just about $7,000 per homeless person. So the question I have for you is this. What do you think is a better use of your money? Spending $7,000 to get one homeless person housed, or to build affordable housing at $490,000 per unit? And which do you think is a better use of your money? Yeah, it seems like a no-brainer to me. It really does. So, if you're here today representing a foundation, you are no doubt already generously supporting organizations that help the homeless. I get that. But I have this idea. What do you think about this idea? What if we collaborate? What if we all financially support it? And everybody in this room could do this. What if we all financially supported the same organizations that have proven track records of actually succeeding in getting people off the street? You know? If we all financially supported the same organizations, I believe we could make a significant impact on the homeless crisis in Portland. I really do. We at HHF believe, working together, that we can do more to help the homeless than working separately. What do you think? You know? Yeah. If you agree, let's talk, okay? So, I'd like to talk about our vision for Portland, our vision being the hope for the homeless. We believe our community where everyone can thrive and homelessness is rare. That is our vision. We believe that people can walk without fear to their favorite restaurants and shops and where businesses can thrive. And I'll make you a bet that's your vision for Portland too, right? And we can do this. I believe we can do this. People have given up. They just said, you know, I'm done with this. I'm frustrated. There's nothing's happening. And in fact, Multnomah County, they're voting with their feet. They're leaving. And for the second consecutive year in a row, the population of Multnomah County has declined by over 10,000 people a year. They are just saying, I'm fed up with this place. And I'm saying, no, we can solve this problem. We can do that when we end the permissive policies that got us into the mess that we're in right now. When we continue showing compassion, we need to show compassion towards the homeless, but stop enabling the homeless living on our street. Stop building expensive housing which doesn't solve the problem in the first place. And when we begin implementing this 9-step plan. When we do these things, this crisis is solvable. Okay? Well, thank you all. Thank you for coming.